Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 131 of Shunya One. We have a absolute corker of an episode for you today. We have Madhusudan R. He is the co-founder of YAP. Now, YAP's the fintech company which nobody has heard about, right? Except if you're in the fintech business, because they're really under the hood and they're what make things work. There is this connectivity required between different fintech services, and YAP provides the APIs that does a lot of that stuff.
Well, welcoming our guest to the show. Hi, Madhusudan. How are you?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
Great. Madhusudan, you're, of course, also based in Bombay, right? So you're all equally, like all of us, stuck at home.
Absolutely.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And
The story, I've not seen my lift. Let me make this better. I've not seen my lift in 7 days.
wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, literally. So you're actually four walls.
We should just let people know we're recording this on the 24th of April, which is like in the
Wow, this is like some time capsule stuff
Yeah,
now. Like
exactly.
we're recording. If you never hear from us again, okay, no, not to make that so more morose than the world already is. It's actually a fairly, at least weather-wise, nice Saturday morning while all of us are cooped up in the house. But welcome to the show, Madhusudan. Thank you so much for doing this. We would love, of course, I would love to jump into, a little bit about your background, your story, introduce us to how you came to build this very interesting fintech platform that you've built. And if you can give us that.
Sure. Yeah. So we started almost about 6 years ago when fintech was not a buzzword. We didn't have the business that we are in. We call it API infrastructure. So API was was not a term that a lot of people in banks would associate themselves with. But my co-founder and I were colleagues at Visa, which is where, we kind of hit out in terms of thinking about, sort of taking a view into the future and saying, if financial services have to sort of get adopted in a broader sense, you'll need companies to be able to offer them and be, in a better position to sort of distribute those products, right? But at the same breath, in our day job, we realized, and I used to run products where my job was to work with banks, work with ecosystem partners, and really go out and put that product in the market, right? So, which meant that you are, you're kind of trying to, bring, it's like marriage, where you're sitting in the middle, trying to get both the bride and the groom families to work together in some sense, and you'd never just get to the wedding day, right? So it kept getting postponed, and that really got sort of frustrating at a point where in around 2010, 11, 12, it used to take like somewhere between 1 to 2 years to launch a product. So someone could make a career out of just doing one product launch in a bank, right? So we kind of said this should not be the way it should be done. And also, because we were perched in a position in Visa where you just don't get an India perspective, but, kind of have a global sort of view of what's happening.
Right.
And we saw in other markets how it's been done, right? Where new platform players came in, they kind of orchestrated how, you can sit in the middle and, do some of these work. So we broadly had like a sense, and we obviously had, been seeing a lot of fintechs that were just getting born. Back in 2014, 15, you had the first wave of fintech action in India. A lot of wallet companies sort of came in.
Yeah.
We just believe that there is something that's out there which we could build valuable. And we sort of decided one day to, quit a well-paying job and just be foolish. And thankfully for us, things worked out, and here we are, 7 years out, almost, and we survived. Yeah.
And when you obviously saw this from the inside, the interesting point you said, right, how banking platforms didn't talk to each other. This is before even, obviously now we have government infrastructure and we have a lot of other things, right? This is before all that happened. Who did you build this for? Like I know you built a platform which talks to both sides, but did you see what was the sort of insight you had that this will solve problems for who? Was it the consumer? Was it for startups who wanted to build fintech products like the layers? Was it for the banks? Who was it primarily for?
I think the primary thesis was around the fact that the way if you just look at it from a time perspective, right? We had banks that came in and built, even from a regulatory standpoint, between let's say 2000 to 2010, a lot of focus was around how do you build financial services through branches. Branches was used, physical infrastructure was
Yeah.
used as the distribution sort of channel, right? Somewhere around 2007, 8, post the global financial crisis, you had new wave of distribution that came about, which is how do you sell products through alternate channels, as it's called, right? Your internet, your mobile. You have the likes of Bank Bazaar and a few fintechs that really started that wave. But that was limited to just distribution, right? So it was more aimed at as a discovery platform. So if I want a loan, I Google up, they do SEO optimization, and 5 bank loans are presented in a single screen from a user perspective. What we believed would happen was that increasingly brands will sort of take over user journeys. If you sort of think about it, you have credit cards from airlines, right? They have no business to be in financial services. But the reason why they do it is, when you start using a card every day, from a brand perspective, you're seeing that brand logo on the card, so it builds affinity. It kind of, also helps the airline to build loyalty, because every time you spend, you're earning miles on the airline, and therefore it is like a very strategic fit from an airline standpoint to do credit card as a business, or a co-brand credit card as a business. But if you actually look at the way it gets structured, it's purely a distribution playbook again.
Yeah.
It doesn't get into the business of how the credit card business is, and that's because that's for the bank to run, because airlines are not in the financial services business. But today, the way the world is, getting out there, you have a lot of brands that are saying, I will also own the P&L. So I just need a bank to come in as a regulatory cover, as somebody who will bring in the balance sheet, if you will, and we would like to run all of this business. Somewhere the picture was hazy, but we believe that increasingly, companies would go out and do all of this stuff by themselves and would want to offer it as their product. But when we looked at tech stacks that were out there, banks inherently were, buying technology internal facing, right? By that, what I mean is, they would want to offer it to their customers, where the customer is sitting inside their core banking system. They're consuming, that product from their mobile banking app or their branches, etc. The moment you unbundle this and put it in a brand, storefront, it kind of breaks from an experience or how other activities associated with that product is, right? It could be if your transaction fails, and you would sort of be able to associate with this. A couple of years ago, when UPI was in its infancy, if a transaction fails on Google Pay, the customer didn't know where to go, right? It's a lot of people complain Google is not helping, but Google really is
couldn't do anything.
that is allowing the guardrails to operate. So therefore, it's imperative that for some of these businesses to scale, you have other back office functions which are invisible from a user perspective, but extremely important to sort of stitch together, right? So we just saw that as an opportunity. We kind of said, this is how potentially the market could move. And then at that point in time, we had the appetite to say, we'll stay invested, we will evolve as it comes. It was not ready like it is today. Thankfully, unlike other markets, India is this vibrant ecosystem today because of a lot of macro factors that played out for the last 8-10 years, right? You had Aadhaar that came in, you had EKYC, and then there was nudge that happened with demonetization because there's overall awareness that got created, right? So,
of course,
but for that moment, while you can debate about the decision on demonetization itself, if there's one industry that extremely benefited out of it is payments and banking, right? A lot of the things, and in fact, I was listening to one of the podcasts from the Zeroza's founder, who spoke about how at that Nitin sort of spoke about just after demonetization, he had a huge jump up in signups on their platform because people had a way to do it, right? So we and COVID kind of has
the same.
Made look demonetization like a trailer and this being the real movie, right? So there are these external sort of stimuli that sort of accelerated it. But the overarching, macro sort of enablement that happened in the country with Aadhaar, with eKYC, really set the pedestal for this sort of growth.
Interesting. And what was that first product that you sort of built? I know it's been, you've been, unlike other sort of startups who we always often talk to, you're a, business for quite many years now. You've building it over time. You've seen these sort of ecosystem changes play out. But at the time, what was the first product you built, and how did you sort of evolve or pivot it, if
Sure.
at all, over time?
Sure. I think we started with the whole, in my last project that I did in my visa job. So we kind of worked with microfinance companies where we were helping them. Today, one of the microfinance companies is a bank called Jana Financial Services, which works with urban poor women. They give a joint liability loan, and they kind of go out and help them to build their own enterprise. It could be a cart vendor, it could be somebody who's running a small enterprise. Essentially, it's a small ticket loan, which is typically the size of $15,000, and they pay it over 1 or 2 years. Those women actually got for the first time into financial services using a prepaid product, right? So the loan was disbursed into a card account, and we saw that adoption, in a massive way, right? A lot of women who never had a bank account or who relied on their husbands to, park money, would end up, having been in a situation where, because they're part of a group, they have to take that 15,000 ticket size loan, but their consumption need or the working capital need could be just 5,000 rupees, right? So therefore, the balance 10,000 normally gets pilfered away in the family. It could be a drunkard husband, it could be a kid who is wanting to blow it all up. So a lot of that cash was, whittled away because they just didn't have a mechanism to save it. So the prepaid became a great vehicle where whatever money was unspent was kept in the card itself, and
Right.
Whenever there was a need, they used it. We realized that if there's one company that could do it at scale, because they felt that need from the market, and we could see that we could also sort of gauge the pulse of the market where there's a lot more demand. There were maybe dozens of microfinance companies serving similar customers in different sort of parts of the world. Jana was a lot focused on urban Bangalore and around the Bangalore sort of ecosystem. So therefore, the first low-hanging opportunity for us to just replicate that model. So we started with serving microfinance companies, gold loan companies in a disbursement kind of a use case. That allowed us to, put out products quickly into the market. We worked with banks that were, keen to partner because they didn't have the wherewithal to, go out and build these products with these customers. So that was our starting point. Obviously, from there, we kind of expanded the use cases and started doing a lot more.
Could you?
So when you're talking about sorry, go ahead, Amit.
No, I was just like, like when I was looking up the company and looking at it and trying to understand it, it didn't really click until I got a couple of examples from Madhu before we spoke, right? So I was like thinking that maybe the microfinance could be one. But could you maybe describe a couple of other ways that companies are using you, or what kinds of companies are using and how they're using you? If that makes sense.
Today, India is every business is looking to become a fintech, and every fintech is looking to lend. So lending is the story as far as India is concerned, because there's so much of unmet, demand in the sense. So many people.
You're the reason for lending becoming a feature, is it?
Partly so.
One of their investors is the famous person who says that.
That's right.
A lot of their investors are famous persons.
Yeah, they have all the famous investors. I saw that on the website as well, which is there's definitely something here I don't understand it, which is I was like, please explain it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these businesses today on our platform are around the lending sort of ecosystem. We have a bunch of companies that are serving new to credit, right? So it could be a young adult, it could be somebody who's just out of college. Typically, banks have this phenomena called credit policy, which essentially means who do I lend to and at what rate is determined by a certain set of assumptions that banks take based on historical data, right? So if that data doesn't exist, you're not going to, sort of be lent money, right? So therefore, it's a chicken and egg where the ecosystem doesn't expand because you don't come into or participate in that ecosystem, which is where a lot of fintechs today are coming in and saying, We will use alternate data. We will look at your, how you are sort of behaving in Facebook and maybe determine whether you have an intention and ability to repay, rather than demonstrating that through a financial product. Right. So a lot of these companies, which are trying to do, I'm sure, as you use some of these consumer internet platforms, in a Swiggy you will find a lazy pay, in some of these products that are out there. They serve a niche sort of, use case, right? But for that business, for the value that they, sort of spend in acquiring a customer, for them to create a long time value from that customer, they will naturally need to broaden the scope of what they do, right? So in a typical digital lending company, we have companies of various kinds, right? There are startups, as I articulated, which are, serving new to credit. There are consumer internet companies like an Ola and a Swiggy, which have aspirations to do financial services product, because that kind of creates long-term value from a user perspective. And then we also have, companies that are, for lack of a better word, old school NBFCs, right, which have been around for a long period of time. They have physical infrastructure, someone like a TVS Credit in Tamil Nadu, a Muthoot in Kerala, or a Mahindra's in the western part of the world, for the country, where, they kind of have this customer locked in because of the brand. It's a local household name, and anything that they want to do in financial services or anything around their life will be served by that brand, right? So TVS is a household name. Your two-wheeler, everything that you do, you'll buy from that brand. But these businesses have not been able to sort of move up the digital bandwagon, right? So they kind of have a need to figure out, how do I serve customers where a lot of the customer cohorts have moved up, right? My driver and I use the same Hotstar account to watch, IPL, right? So that kind of democratized and made it, sort of accessible to everyone. Therefore, if there is disruption happening, there is somebody that is getting disrupted, right?
Right.
So highly likely that traditional sort of NBFCs are likely to get disrupted. So we work with a lot of them, telling them that, instilling fear psychosis, saying, if you don't do this, I have this company on my platform which is going to take away your lunch, right? So there's this heterogeneous mix of companies that are trying to solve for, how do I move up the value chain? How do I offer better products? And it's across the board, right? In travel, we have 5 or 6 startups that are doing a Revolut clone, right? Which is essentially saying people are traveling abroad, not in this time of the world, but typically, you'd have 5 or 6 startups doing Revolut equivalent products. You'll also have the traditional, Thomas Cooks of the world, which are saying we also want to offer, the same product experience as Revolut, because beyond the 100 million users in India, the user journeys and the consumption is happening from these brands that are in tier 2, tier 3 towns, right? So to answer your question in terms of what use cases, in every one of this digital lending journey, if I take TVS as an example, we surface, a card proposition or a payment proposition where there is UPI plus card on top of the credit line that is given to a customer. So if Amit gets a line of credit from TVS, when you are at a point of purchase, let's say you walk into a store to buy a refrigerator, uh, it is in shopkeeper's interest to upgrade you to a higher cost refrigerator, and you're there with your wife, so he's going to sell to your wife saying, you're buying this once in 10 years, why don't you go for a bigger one, right? So you go in with a budget of $10,000, and that guy upsells a 25,000 refrigerator, and you're caught in this catch 22 where you can't tell your wife you're not going to buy that. So you're sort of struggling, right? Which is when the loan guy comes in and says, I'm from Bajaj or one of these brands, I will help you, borrow for the gap that you have. Whatever money that you brought in or budgeted, we just make that as a down payment, and the rest can come in. So if you actually imagine this scenario, it happens in real time in the physical sort of world. But in the digital world, there is no, agent who comes in and upsells this to you, right? So this is where technologies will have to come into play, where if you're looking for some product, systems will have to figure out where you have the line. Is there a possibility for you to, be upsold a higher ticket product? That's the role that we play. We work with merchants, where we are able to, sort of tightly couple with their, platform, and really bring all of these, providers of credit to let them distribute the line of credit that they've given, right? So we are an enabling infrastructure in some ways. It could be through a card, it could be through like a one-click checkout experience, whatever that is, right? I think we don't really worry about what form it takes, because as long as we are part of that money flow, we make our buck, so we don't really care whether it is through a certain process or product in some ways.
And all of this is obviously multiple platforms. I actually want to get into the tech pieces of it as well. But the business is all your business, or your revenue is all based on transactions, right? After all,
Absolutely.
like you're enabling transactions of various kinds.
Yeah. We make money only when there is a money flow that is happening. So it is in our interest to make sure that it is seamless, it works.
Obviously, like we just said, that a large part of this is you enabling lending. But what does that make you? Are you just the technology broker? Did you not ever think of getting into the, any sort of taking more of the stack on either side, right? Because you're sitting in the middle. What do you own which is proprietary? Like, do you own the customer intelligence? Do you own who can be lent to? Do you own what is the, I would say, core IP beyond the tech enablement that you guys have built over time?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we are in this business where, a lot of companies have customers who they want to serve, and, and there's different, types of customers who are sitting in those businesses. So it's like, the consumer journey in India is a war, right? So we would much rather be an arms dealer in the war and supply to all sides than, get into the war itself. So we are very clear that we would never want to do consumer facing businesses or applications, because it kind of creates channel conflict. And I would probably take on a best effort basis, you would probably get to like 1 or 2% of the whole, whatever is happening across the country. We have a much higher probability of taking a lion's share of being somebody sitting in the middle. The value from a platform standpoint is actually on the network effects that accrues on the platform, because we have these today. If you look at it across the number of fintechs and businesses, the different cohorts of businesses that I spoke about, we have somewhere in the 40-50 million users who are digitally active on our platform. And if you look at it, we're probably, if I just call myself as a bank, we're probably the largest bank with the largest base of active, digitally active sort of users, right? So that's very powerful in the sense that our ability to go to a merchant or any business for that matter and say that, guess what, I am able to funnel 50 million users. Do you want to sort of connect with me and leverage my platform, right? So therefore, there's naturally this network effect that will accrue where more and more merchants will come into the platform. By seeing those more merchants, there'll be more banks and some of these fintechs who will want to be associated with the platform play, and we would naturally and then you would think about what more layering that we could do. We could add other products that are out there, which will help us to sort of keep that going. The challenge, and that itself becomes a moat, right? So it's not easy for somebody to come and say, give that same promise, because these executions and all sort of take time, right? So, and it's in our interest, and it's my job to make sure that we keep shifting the goalpost, even if there is a new competition comes in. The breadth of products could just not be, provided on day zero.
But a lot of these folks, and again, I'm looking at the landscape that has evolved of fintech over the years. A lot of people got into the lending piece themselves. They said, I want to own the order book, right? And that's when they started becoming more like banks, or they got into this wallet license business, or had regulated sort of side of the business. Then there were, like I said, the folks who want to own the consumer front, saying they're my users, and like many of the various investors who are in various fintech companies, the investors you have, or your the folks you're backed by, Amrish, or whether it's Kunal or anyone else, these folks all are building consumer facing businesses. You're trying to be invisible and in the background, and only be the network layer. Probably like you said, like your roots in Visa, sort of similar to that. So what is the actual, so I'm still curious, what is the then accruing, how are you accruing that value over time if you don't on either side?
We would like to believe that we would get built out to be like the Intel inside of the fintech ecosystem, right? So a piece of the code will be there in every fintech that's out there, irrespective of what the packaged product is. But we really are at a moment in time where banking would become like what cloud computing went through, right? It may not be at the same velocity and speed, simply because it's regulated and people's money and a whole bunch of other things. But from where we sit, we clearly see this velocity increasing every quarter, right? I tweeted about this about a few weeks ago, where last month, the last quarter, Jan, Feb, March quarter, we had 84 new fintech signups on our platform, which is like every day we had like one or two coming in.
Wow.
Like, look at working days, right? And this number about 18 months ago was 12 or 15, right? So there's a lot more of the entrepreneurial ecosystem which is looking to do stuff. So which means that we are in some ways becoming like a product nation where there is going to be innovation wave. A lot of people will try, many will fail. But the reality is that if you're able to create an ecosystem where people can come and express themselves and make it easy for them to sort of do it, it's a great gratification. And naturally, we would have that value ascribed, as we sort of move along. So there's obviously this balancing act that we need to do in terms of keeping that lights on and running that business, which we can do in many ways, right? We sort of expanded geographically to other markets. We are porting whatever we have built in India to a few other markets. But at the core of what we sort of started, which is to help companies, that has not sort of, in fact, it's got strengthened because of the fact that there's a lot more action happening in India right now.
You're saying the fact that like platforms like UPI and or bodies like NPCI have helped you, I would say, accelerate. And there's no, you don't see that as a threat that people will choose to directly build on these platforms and not have to use your services?
No, I mean, I'm super confident of the inefficiencies in banks. So, so yeah, we would, as long as banks are there, we would survive. So, yeah.
So then the actual like most other fintechs, the actual threat or ignoring opportunity is the whole decentralized chain of banking and fintech, I guess. I mean, if that is a thing.
Yeah. So in most emerging markets, we realize, we see this regulators not being open to, I mean, for all the right reasons could be, they're not open to the idea of giving out new licenses at will, right? So you will still want to deal with the banks. And from a banker perspective, there's also realization that this whole fintech action is no longer a fad. They want to participate. They want to be seen fintech friendly. Only in the last year or so, we work with the large banks in the country. Prior, for the first few years, we were working with relatively smaller banks because they had the appetite to actually, take on some of these.
Try new stuff.
Right, try new stuff. But today we are, at a point where large banks in many countries are saying we want to be part of this ecosystem, right? It doesn't matter whether we make money or not. We want to be seen fintech friendly. So therefore, the motivation even within the banks have changed. It's no longer about P&L. It's about participating in this wave and not be left out.
That's amazing. As a you mentioned so many people signed up with you, earlier this year. If I was a fintech founder, again, what would I do? What would you solve for me that I wouldn't have to do anymore? Let's say I want to build a any app, right? Or any service, consumer facing. I obviously want to be consumer facing. But what would you solve for me? Just for anyone listening who's probably building an app.
Sure. There are three things that we do. One is obviously, providing a tech platform which some of these folks understand and appreciate, right? That's the core of what we offer. The second piece is we spend a lot of time, co-creating products with them, right? So you might come with an idea, but we would have seen something not working in other fintech. People who are, we are like an index of fintech action. Therefore, we know that somebody who's coming and saying, we're going to do this great idea, it could have dawned on them, when in the dorm room, but reality is that when it goes out in the market, it may not, so we're very, very sort of candid about it. If something doesn't work, we have seen it not working. That's valuable sort of insight because it's going to save time and dollars, right? So we co-create products where if there is something that we believe that product can inherently add a lot more value to them, we do that. So we are like a non-remunerative consulting product management organization, right?
Okay.
And so that's a big part of what we do. And it's a journey, right? So we keep evolving. So they iterate. If something is not working, we go back and reset and things like that, right? So there's a lot of work that goes into uh, you know uh, how we can co-create that product with them. The third piece, obviously, is the inefficiency of the bank. So you don't have to deal with banks. So if you tell this to a fintech founder, it's like
Yeah.
music to their ears. A lot of people keep coming back and asking, "Is it really the case?" So people who have gone around. So if you and they discover us, right? So a lot of the companies that are on our platform, their investors know us because it's part of the boardroom conversations and all. So therefore, our BD funnel is a lot of investors who see deal flows happening where they say that if you are struggling, go speak to Madhu and do it. And for the longest period of time, we never had like a biz dev team because people would just do
Yeah.
that referral coming to us. So therefore, there is technology, there's product management, and how do you operationalize it, and we leave that whole distribution story for them to sort of figure it out.
Oh, that's quite a bit, actually. When you think about it, you are obviously offering these multitude of services, and the ecosystem is growing. So there's always constant innovation which founders are trying, or of course newer things that are getting launched. What is like you said, you've touched upon the fact that you can expand, obviously, in other regions and other countries. Uh, what is the is that hard to do, given that you've built so much today, or because every region has different regulations and so on and so forth? Like, what's the moat for others in other countries building stuff like this?
Yeah, I think to my earlier point, right, India has this whole macro factor that is playing out. So when we looked around almost 24 months ago, we decided that we're just putting too much into India, and if some regulatory
Yeah.
circular, we can completely get swamped with stuff situation we may not want to be in. So we looked at Southeast Asia, we looked at Middle East, because those are like flights are 4 hours, you'll get Indian food, and and you don't have to
Yeah.
really worry about being too
Yeah.
far away from home. But when we went to Southeast Asia, we realized that while there's a lot of consumer internet action happening, it's not the depth of some of these execution was not there. Companies were getting merged every 6 or 8 months, and we never had this overarching public good infrastructure, right? So in Vietnam, for instance, doesn't have a credit bureau. India has been having, we've had this for like 15 years. There's no Aadhaar ID what we have. A lot of the fintech action, what we don't appreciate, and we realize that only when you go out, is because of these macro factors that is making it simply, right? So today you could virtually open any financial product sitting at home and doing it, because there is, your identity is
Aadhaar KYC.
taken care of. Payments is sort of largely taken care of. You don't have to. There's very little room for you to innovate on payments. Really at the core. So a lot of this appreciation is not there from us who are sitting as operators here. But when you go to other markets, those regulators, banks actually value it, right? So therefore, we try to actually sort of try and port some of the work that we have done. We have to obviously make it amenable to that market and the condition that's out there. So therefore, our focus gravitated towards Middle East, and we said that is more lucrative as a market for the platform play that we were in. So we started the business with the local head office in Abu Dhabi, and we are serving markets across GCC and North Africa. But we believe that in every market, and this is something that I've had conversations with large leaders in large banks. They all look up to India to sort of figure out how can they do some of the stuff that we have done really well. And fortunately, in most of these markets, at the senior leadership level, you'll find one or two Indians at least in a group.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of pride in the way things have got done here, but we would eventually crack it, right? So it might not be the same sales cycle as it happens in India, because you are familiar with the market and stuff like that. But most other markets would go through the same way, right? So, therefore, to the analogy on cloud computing, right? So every market, there cannot be an exception to AWS infrastructure, right? Every market will take it at some point or the other.
Yeah. So, and you're building that AWS of banking or something
like
to that effect. To that effect. It's interesting. I mean, the fact that India is now seen as a sort of the innovation leader in fintech is amazing, and of course, largely due to the fact that the mainstream banking infrastructure adopted so much from a digital standpoint. You will obviously continue to innovate here and work with that innovation, and like you said, you're scaling elsewhere as well. What is it for you? What's the immediate sort of next step, and what are you looking for? I would say you are obviously you're backed by a lot of interesting folks. Is your business like the unicorn? Are you in the unicorn building business, or are you in the, like you said, arms dealer but stay in the shadows? What's your plan now?
We have I think about 8 or 9 unicorns in our platform. So we would much rather be a unicorn factory than, and by virtue of that, become somewhere. I think we are. Fortunately for us, we have been sort of well placed in a lot of these things. We just got the timing right from a getting to the market standpoint. But fundamentally, we believe that India would be this fintech factory of the world, right? Where it's not like China has not done it, or US has not done it. If you really look at it, I keep saying this: PayPal came into the US 20 years ago, and it's still a relevant product, which is crazy, right?
Yep.
So in many ways, India has sort of moved up in terms of how, and China has been this 2 or 3 company story. So we have got created over the last 5-7 years is really fascinating, and how you could help other companies. And the good part with building business in India, that you've got to a point of, from a pricing and commercial structure standpoint, it cannot go worse than what you have in India, right? So everywhere else we go, it's going to be net positive from at a unit level, at least, right? So we would see ourselves 5 years out as a publicly listed company. Hopefully we're able to take it to 15-20 markets across Asia, and that's at least is what in my radar, and beyond that we don't know.
Awesome.
So,
awesome.
when you talk about like other countries, and they're looking at India in some sense as a model, right? From this perspective, right? A model from what's applied in the fintech, what's happened in the fintech space, right? And I think one of the reasons you were mentioning that that we don't appreciate it over here. One of the reasons that I think that there's been a lot of negative this on it is some of the privacy concerns and things like that, right? Do you think that other markets are hesitant to kind of implement similar things because of that reason, based on what you have seen when you go out there? Or is this, or are the markets that you're looking at don't really think of that as so much of a problem? Is that more of a European, Western European American issue?
Yeah, I think it's overcooked from the western parts of the world, right? Yeah. I believe that today what UPI has, there's no information exchange that happens beyond the transaction itself, right? So you could, if there's the right intent, you could build out even by addressing those concerns. It's not so much about. I don't think we are building it like today. We're at the cusp of launching another data exchange product. At an ecosystem level, it's called account aggregator, which essentially means that if you're on a third-party storefront and you want to take a loan on, let's say you're buying a phone, somebody is saying, I will, I'll finance this particular product. We're building technology where, at a click of a button and your consent, that data will actually get ported from, let's say you're banking with State Bank of India, from your account into the financing company's account, right? I think what we are doing is building new capability at country scale, which will actually are like public good, right? So and then the private enterprise with capital comes and really sort of pumps it up, right? Just look at UPI, right? Google Pay was not even in the picture 4 years ago, right? And globally, I think they are the first success from Google as far as payment business is concerned. They've attempted multiple times, and I think India is only somewhere close. They don't make money, but that's a different matter. But I think that's what will happen, right? So you'll have democratization happening because there is a larger standardization because of these public good infrastructure that's happening, right? Which is the model that other markets will adopt, right? It could be led by public policy, or it could just be a licensing regime, right? Like we are seeing this in Saudi Arabia, for instance, where even open banking is licensed. So you could be an open banking platform because you have that license, and by virtue of that, the regulator has an overarching sort of supervisory power over you. So if there's some misuse, they're going to sort of come down clamping, right? Different markets will adopt it differently based on their own nuances and market dynamics.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's not like you said earlier, it's not like they're gonna get super efficient overnight either. Yeah. And although like you said, they do like to play policy games.
Yeah.
I think that's the only sort of risk. But I don't think India's headed that way. I think India India has crypto to worry about now. So
that's the only policy game we are playing.
They're
or at least the next
misdirected
one.
with that at the moment.
Highly misdirected.
Yeah. Madhu, you said what's the best way to reach you? Do you want to do a shout out to anyone listening? Are you guys hiring? Are you guys scaling up? How do people reach you? Are you on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm active on Twitter. So madhu@m2p.in is my email. You can drop a note, or DM me. So we're always hiring. So we're hiring across the board. We're about 250 odd member team now. By the end of this year, will be about 400 people. So there's a lot of work, and we don't really.
Yeah, it's a lot of folks for. Yeah. Is it primarily tech, engineering? Is it field?
Yeah, about 40% would be engineers, and we also run operations for banks and all that. So there's market-facing roles that are out there. We're doing a lot of work on the product management side. So, folks, there's a lot of things that you could come build for other companies and without worrying about P&L, right? So, it's a lot of the product manager good ideas get killed because there's no money in the company to sort of do it. So we are hiring in a big way. Very happy to sort of look at founders, product managers who are out there killing stuff.
Awesome.
Oh, awesome. I'll also just remind everybody, please do a rating or a review. If you're on Apple Podcast specifically, please go and do a review. Been asking for a few weeks. Please, guys, go and give us some reviews. It really does help with discovery.
Absolutely. And Madhu, thank you so much. This was a great chat. Of course, we're looking forward to hearing more. And by the way, I have to ask, I know it's way at the end of the episode for those who waited. What was the inspiration behind the name? And I know it's pay backwards, but is that what it is?
So there was a lot of pay. I think back then we had like so many companies that said pay, this pay, that pay. We just said, and the first product that we put out was a QR scan and pay, right? Payments is a pull. So when you swipe a card, money gets pulled from your account. But in a QR scan and pay, you actually push money to the merchant. So we were just reversing the payment flow. We said we'll reverse in the name. So that's how. And awesome. The challenge was not to, and also when we looked around globally, 3 or 4 digit, 4 character names have a lot more success. So we wanted to keep it small. So that was also a reason.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. It was a great chat. And of course, look forward to not hearing about you, but a lot more fintechs who are silently, scaling overnight thanks to you. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on the show. Great. Lovely talking to you and Amit over the last half an hour.
Thanks.
So if you enjoyed that clip, check out the entire episode on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.